this is the overall architecture and flow of a complete DevOps pipeline. And so in your environment, these are the basic things that you have to have. And now I recognize this text is pretty small and you can't read it. And this is only the top 1/3 of the overall DevOps architecture poster. So if you would like a high resolution version of this, what is a 2-foot by 3-foot DevOps architecture poster, then just let us know in the chat. And if you missed that, then you can, of course, send me an email, but there's a link in the chat as well. But let me zoom back into the top 1/3, just walk through the parts that are really material to the topic today. You can see that we have our Git repository. When we have changes, a build is kicked off, an integration build at the team level. And then if that succeeds, we are going to create a release candidate, a versioned release candidate, and store it in a good spot. Azure DevOps has Azure Artifacts, and Octopus Deploy has a built-in package server and NuGet server, which of course supports zip files, very flexible. But we need to have those packages, and then we start deploying. Now it's really key. There are 3 unique categories of environments that anybody's going to have in a DevOps environment, and you need at least, at a minimum, of one of each. If you don't have that minimum, you're just not going to be able to do this. And a lot of teams have more than 3, and actually we're going to demo you more than 3, but you need production. You need at least one of those. Everybody knows that. Okay, without production, what are we doing here? And oftentimes you have multiple productions, whether it's, North American region or European region, or sometimes, there's a dedicated production environment for government customers, or you segment the load. Salesforce.com has any number of production environments, just so that they don't put too many customers on a single environment. That's pretty common, but you need at least one production environment. Backing up from that is a manual test environment. UAT is a common name for that, but also dev, test, staging, DIT, SIT. There's so many names for an environment where some audience, some person would do some type of testing on that environment. I need to go into this and use the software and check it out to make sure it's good, or if I should report a bug or clear it and it can go into production. And oftentimes you're going to have multiple of these manual test environments if you have multiple audiences or departments that each need this. And we'll show you in our demo, we've split it out. And Octopus Deploy has this guidance as well, because it's very common for the actual product team to need a manual test environment just for themselves. Whether you want to call it your dev environment or a test environment, the names are up to you. But oftentimes the product team itself, the engineering group itself, they want an environment. That's common. And then oftentimes, if there's some different testers or different customer or marketing groups, they want to test the next version of the project. We might need to give them an environment of their own. And then the production engineers who, if it's to that scale where you have a different group besides the engineering team actually deploying to production, if it's of that scale, they might need a staging environment where they can do some things and test out telemetry and logging and integration with other things before it goes to production. So, but you need at least one manual test environment minimum. And then, of course, you would choose to have multiple based on the different audiences that you have in your particular organization. And then backing off from that, you need at least one test automation environment. We like to call this the TDD environment. And this is the environment that completes our continuous integration process, which has 3 phases. Remember, if your group says, hey, we use continuous integration, but you don't have an environment that's automatically deployed and automatically runs some type of post-deployment tests of some kind, then you haven't finished your continuous integration implementation, because continuous integration is 3 things. Private build that runs on an individual engineer's workstation, that build script. Second is an integration build that runs on a shared team server of some sort, build server. And the third step is your first deployment of this new release candidate and checking it out somehow. It could be as simple as a quick smoke test to make sure that the main screen comes up. If it's a web application, go to that URL, make sure it comes up versus blowing up on you. Or if whatever type of application is, if it's a backend service, send one message down the queue, make sure it picks it up, things like that. Because oftentimes unit tests can pass, integration tests can pass, but if it doesn't deploy, start up, and actually work in a basic way, it's a total waste of time to push it to a manual test environment. And we're wasting our colleagues' time by saying, hey, version such and such is available for testing, but it's actually not. So to complete our continuous integration process, we deploy to a first environment. And we see in a lot of teams, this type of environment is often missing. But we call it the TDD environment because it kind of invokes test-driven development. And along with post-deploy smoke tests, it's very, very useful to run full system acceptance testing. Once your team gets to that sophistication with test automation, and using tools like Selenium or Playwright or any other number of tools. You can also do some siloed performance testing, whatever you can do in a short, reasonable period of time that's useful to answer the question, we have a new build. Is it less stable than the previous build? In which case, I don't want to move it downstream. Or is it at least as stable as the previous build and it does something new because there was a change? In that case, we got a new release candidate. Let's move it down. Let's start deploying it to our manual test environment. So that's how you want to think about your deployment pipeline. Again, there's 3 main categories of environments that we deploy certain ways to. You need at least one of those. And of course, it's very common to have more of each of the 3 categories, just depending on your organization.